So I want to talk about adrenaline receptors, or as some people call them, adrenergic receptors, but I call it what it actually is. So it's adrenaline receptors, since they're receptors that receive the two types of adrenaline, norepi and epi, norepinephrine and epinephrine. Um, I yeah, it's really really important. The whole framework of autonomics, of farm, like the whole class of farm is mostly autonomics versus inflammation. So you have anti-inflammatory stuff and you have stuff that acts on the autonomic system, whether it be sympathetic or parasympathetic. So it's really important, and it's something that I got confused and tripped up on learning it and also on applying it in the past. So I've understood it better over time, and so I want to make a theme on it. So there's alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, beta 2, and I use my square shape for this since it's 4 themes, and it lines up pretty perfectly, which is very nice. So shout out to Bree back in M1 year, or when I was in M1. She pointed this rule out to me. We hadn't actually really formally learned it in class, and it made things so much easier. And that rule is the whole mnemonic of you have one heart and 2 lungs. So it's about the beta receptors. So I'll start out by saying it's beautiful because with my square shapes, what I'll do is I'll choose one theme to divide it by so that it ends up still being just 2 themes. Even though it's 4, it's just 2. Vessels versus organ. But it's cool because for this one, it lines up. It actually works both ways. Like not just in a way that you force for like memory purposes. It works both ways like naturally, and it's really cool. So I'll do this way first. So what do we have here? Vessels versus organs. Okay. So that's, alpha versus beta. So the alpha receptors act on your peripheral vasculature, your blood vessels, to constrict them, and then, so that's blood vessel, and then your betas, they're like bigger, right? Instead of just 1 circle, it's 2 circles. They're bigger, they're more juicier and more substantive. So they work on actual organs rather than just mere blood vessels. That's how I think of it. So you have 1 heart, so beta 1 acts on the heart, and you have 2 kidneys, so you have 2 lungs, so beta 2 acts on the lungs. Those are the things in your chest, right? The big famous guys of the body, right? The organs I call the survivors are the brain, the heart, and the lungs, right? In your head and chest. Why are they in your head and your chest, the upper part of your body, not in your abdomen and legs or whatever? Because they're the most important for your survival. So, you evolutionarily, you want to keep them as far away from the ground as possible. So they're not in danger of little fiends, animals or whatever, getting them. So it's like, of course, when you think of 1 heart, 2 lungs, that's beta. The theme that I learned as we're doing renal and then even more with cardiopulmonary, ironically, is that the kidneys are so important. So even though it's like 1 heart and 2 lungs, that's how I originally learned it, and that's how I still remember it. But the thing I add on to that is that the guy that works on the heart, beta 1, also works on the kidneys. And I put my kidney bean symbol I always use for that. That's really important because this is a whole another video that I want to do, but it's basically like you start with heme. Actually, I'm going to go on a tangent because it's kind of worth it. So you start with heme. When you're taking, our Brody M2 curriculum, organ system, organ systems based for the second year, the first organ system you learn is heme. That's blood. You don't learn heart and lungs, all this stuff that you think is so important, and brain. You learn heme first. Why? Because your blood is you. Your blood is your body. The bloodstream is the river of life that carries all the nutrients, oxygen, whatever, that will supply the whole body. When a germ gets in your blood, that's called bacteremia or viremia or sepsis. When a germ gets in your blood, your whole body gets infected, not a specific organ, right? Your whole body can get infected because the blood goes to the whole body. The blood represents everything in the body. That's why you get a complete blood count and a BMP, a basic metabolic panel on your patient when you want to see how their body is doing. When you want to know what's going on with the person's body, you test their blood. The blood is the person. So I'm trying to highlight like how important blood is. Even with like, renal, right? You have the renal tubule with where the pee is being made, and then you have outside of it the bloodstream, right? When you move things from pee into blood, you call it absorption. But when you move things from blood into pee, you call it secretion, because secreting is secreting something out of you. Absorbing is to absorb into you, because your blood is you. So blood is the most important organ, even though I don't think it counts as an organ. But even so, it's the most important organ. That's like what I'm trying to get across. Blood is so important. I'm not talking about this, by the way. This is blood vessel. This is a different thing. I'm talking about blood itself. Why did I make that big point? Because when you think about blood, what organ do you think about? The heart, cardiovascular, right? Wrong. Yeah, right, but wrong. It's actually the first one that you should think about more is the kidney, not the heart. If you wanted to do it, it's a little bit, misogynist or whatever, but if you wanted to do it, just for memory tool, the kidney is the king of the heart, and the king of blood, and the heart is actually the queen of blood. The heart is not the king of blood. The heart is not the first one that you think of. The heart, actually, maybe not even queen. The heart is just a pump that moves blood. So it's just the delivery man almost, you know what I'm saying? Manual labor type thing. The kidney is the one that controls the blood. The kidney is the one that controls literally how much blood you have in your body, right? It controls how much fluid is in your blood. It controls what ions are in your blood, sodium, potassium, all that sort of thing, which means that the kidney controls literally what your blood is made of. It controls how much blood you have, because it controls the amount of fluid, so that's why it's really important for blood pressure, and it controls what's in your blood. So it literally creates your blood, right? When it filters your blood and it keeps certain things in the tubule, in the pee, and then it puts certain things back out into the bloodstream, your kidney is literally deciding what the makeup of your blood would be. So the kidney is the king of blood. Anytime you're thinking, because when you get to cardiovascular, right, the cardiopulmonary exam, and you're doing cardiovascular system, especially for pharm, and you're trying to think about, how do we treat heart failure? How do we treat congestive heart failure? We need to affect the amount of fluid, congestive fluid, in the body. How do we treat, blood pressure? We have to affect the amount of blood in the body, right? There's so much kidney in that pharm. So it's really important, and I wasn't doing this at first. It was very difficult. Now it's gotten easier because I realized when I think of blood, I should be thinking of the kidneys just as much as I think of the heart. That's what I'm trying to make. And it applies here because pharm is going to be all about these receptors. Like a huge half of pharm is about these sympathetic receptors. So, right, adrenaline, that's the sympathetic stuff. So this is all sympathetic stuff. And if half of pharm is autonomics, then that means these 4 receptors are half of autonomics. So they're a quarter of all of pharm, basically, loosely, right? So yeah, beta 1 acts on the heart, but it also acts on the kidneys. That's my point. It acts on the heart and kidneys. And it increases, it boosts them up. Beta 2, we say that it acts on the lungs, but that's technically kind of a lie or whatever, because no, it's not a lie. Yeah, it acts on the lungs. It dilates the airways so that you can breathe more, right? Because when you're in a sympathetic state, you need to breathe. You don't need to be resting and relaxing. You need to be breathing hard so you can run away from the bear or whatever. That's sympathetic fight or flight. So it acts on the lungs and dilates the airways, but it also dilates the blood vessels in the lungs so that you can get more blood to your lungs and everything. So it's a dilator. That is unique. I'll go through quickly what they do because I didn't do that. Alpha 1, first off, there's a lot of ways that you can do this that are all important. I'm going to box off Alpha 2 because he's weird. Actually, let me just do it now. These guys are both weird, but Alpha 2 is really weird. So the 2s are weird. They're like the weirdos. They're counterintuitive from what you would think a sympathetic should do, because all 4 of these are team sympathetic. The Alpha 1 are the leaders, so they're normal, and they're kind of the main character. Actually, they are the main character. Let me just put that. Main. They're the main ones, the number ones. So Alpha 1 is the main guy for your vessels. It constricts your blood vessels, right? It squeezes them. The GQ for squeeze. And then Beta 1 is the main guy for organs because it acts on the main organ, the number one, right? Your heart, and also your kidney, because these are the two guys in charge of blood, right? So you remember there's one heart, and then you just know that the one that goes with the heart, you also add the kidney to it. That's how I remember it. So it acts on the heart and kidneys. It's going to increase your heart. Increase your heart what? Well, your heart rate and your heart contractility, right? What is heart rate? Speed. What is heart contractility? Strength. Those are the things that determine your cardiac output. How much blood your heart is putting out. How much results is your heart producing, basically. The two things that affect that are speed and strength. You'll learn that strength is actually a lot better. It's better to have strong quality pumps than to have a lot of pumps and be pumping really fast. But they both technically, are supposed to anyways, help increase your cardiac output, the amount of blood that your heart is getting out around your body. So, beta 1 is going to increase both of those things. It's going to increase heart rate and increase heart contractility, increase speed and strength. So it's just increasing your heart overall. Then beta 1 is also going to increase your kidneys. What do I mean by that? It's going to activate the RAS system. When your kidneys sense that your blood pressure is too low, aka they're not getting fed with blood, they increase your RAS system, which the whole goal of that is basically just to increase your blood pressure. So the kidneys help you increase your blood pressure by causing you to have more blood in your body. How? Because it causes you to have more fluid in your blood, so more fluid in your body. How? Because it causes you to retain sodium and water. Because water always follows sodium. They always move together. I call it salt water instead of water. So I just call it that now, so I always remember that together. So yeah, it increases your blood pressure. So they both, it increases this and increases RAS. Okay, beta 1, activating the heart and the kidney. Beta 2 dilates the airways and dilates the blood vessels. Alpha 1 constricts the blood vessels. Okay, so when it comes to vessels, we have a constricting the vessels and versus dilating the vessels, right? Okay, we also have the main guy that acts on the vessels versus the main guy that acts on the organs. Okay, so that's between the main guys. There's vascular versus organ. What about the weird guys? So this guy's the opposite of this guy. So you think that he dilates, right? No, he also constricts the vessels. They both do the same thing at the periphery. But the thing is, when I say at the periphery, I mean at the actual blood vessel itself. Versus central would mean it's acting on your actual nervous system and on your brain. So it's basically a situation of command versus response or follower, right? I'm going to put commander versus follower. So basically your nervous system, this, tells your body parts to do things, and then your body parts, this, do it. So for your nervous system, I just call it brain. That's loose, but it's not literally only your brain, but I just call it brain. Central versus peripheral, right? So when they say, the action of alpha 2 in the periphery, because this periphery thing is this central versus peripheral relationship is mostly, it's just important for alpha 2. That's what's unique about alpha 2 and weird about it. Basically, it's weird because it turns your sympathetics off. These guys are all sympathetic, but it turns your sympathetic off. That's why it's unique. It's going against the team. It's going against the grain. It's the traitor out of this group. But it does that at the central part, so at your brain, right? It acts on the brain to tell your brain, hey, turn off the sympathetics, right? It's a negative feedback. But at the periphery, which means at the actual blood vessel, it does the same thing as alpha 1. It constricts. So you could say it's like trying to act like down in the periphery in the body part, trying to act like I'm part of the team. But then it's sneaking up to the brain behind the scenes and saying inhibit everybody else on my team, inhibit sympathetics. So it's like the traitor. So that's alpha 2. What was I saying about this split? If you split it this way, you get vessels versus organs relationship. If you split it this way, you get the normal main guys versus the weird guys that kind of balance it out. Why do I say balance it out? And maybe that's what I should have put instead. Because it helped me to think about them that way, because the dilator, when it comes to sympathetic, sympathetic versus parasympathetic, Your sympathetic wants your blood pressure to be high, so that blood is like really going to like all the body parts that need it, and you're like freaking out and everything. So constricting your vessels is going to make your blood pressure high, right? Increasing your cardiac output is going to make your blood pressure high. Increasing the amount of fluid you have is going to make your blood pressure high, right? Cardiac output, fluid. All these things make sense. Yes, this dilates your blood vessels, but it only does that at the lungs, so that the lungs can receive more blood flow. So, these guys all make sense for sympathetic. Well, no, actually, no, that's my point. These guys all make sense for sympathetic because they're causing you to, increase your blood pressure. So this one is constricting you. This guy also acts on vessels, so you would expect him to constrict, but he doesn't. He dilates, and it is so that you can get more blood flow to the lungs. But the idea is that since this guy constricts and this guy dilates, they're like, this guy's what you normally expect from sympathetic, but this guy is balancing him out. That's what I'm trying to say. So there's things with drugs where if you give a drug that blocks beta, right? If the person is in a hyperadrenergic state, which means they have too much adrenaline, what does that adrenaline want to do? It wants to bind to all these adrenaline receptors as it's floating around in the body. So if you block these guys, you might think, oh, I'm just trying to block his heart and kidney so that they can relax. But the thing is that because if it was a beta blocker that is non-selective, it blocks both beta 1 and beta 2. Because you block this dilation, you blocked your balance. Now everything is going to constrict way too much. So I'm trying to characterize it in a way of think of these one guys as the main guys, but then these two guys matter too because they bring a balance. So beta 2, I call it the balancer for that hyperadrenergic region, that whole concept, which we'll get later. Alpha 2 is also a balancer in a way, but I don't call it the balancer. I call it the inhibitor or the, the traitor or whatever. And that's because, it goes to the brain and it inhibits everybody else. So again, it's bringing balance. So actually, I could say change it to the dilator and say that they're both balancers instead of calling them weird, derogatory. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's actually better because the thing is, I'm not trying to just explain what they do because I already knew that. What I'm trying to explain is how they should be characterized, because that's what I was missing, and it helped me understand better when I realized that. It's helpful, I think, to think of these guys, these four, in this sense of you have the default main ones that are doing the job for the most part, and then you have the ones that are bringing balance to that job. He brings balance. This alpha 2 brings balance centrally, right? Which means on the brain, right? Upstream, at the part of the command, right? The alpha 2 is working up here to balance everybody out by inhibiting all the other guys, all three of them. Versus this beta 2 is bringing balance at the periphery. What does that mean? Not the brain, but the body, right? Why? Because he's dilating blood vessels. And really, it mostly happens at the lungs anyway, not out in the actual vasculature, right? But it's still in the body. So the idea is if it has 2, it's not the leader, rather it's the balancer. That's what I'm trying to say. If it has 2, it's a balancer. There are only 2 balancers, and of course they're a pair. They're going to be opposite from each other. How are they opposite from each other? Because they bring balance in 2 opposite ways. He brings balance at the blood vessel level by dilating, whereas he brings balance at the brain level via inhibition. I actually didn't have it that clean until just now as I'm making this video. So it's okay, yeah, that's the vibe I was trying to get at. That's it. And of course, these guys also have an opposite relationship with each other. The ones, why? Because he does the sympathetic job of constricting and increasing blood pressure. That's the overall goal. He does that at the vessel level, whereas he helps increase blood pressure from the organ level, right? By increasing cardiac output and increasing RAS. So I'll put a versus here too. This verse is going to be blood pressure. They're both increasing blood pressure in 2 opposite ways. vessel versus organ. These balancer guys are unique. Rather than increasing, I guess you could say they're decreasing blood pressure. But this doesn't really decrease blood pressure because there's much fewer of these guys in the blood than there are of this guy. This guy's actually the main character sorry, not in the blood, the body. This guy's actually the main character of like this whole thing. Like, it's just the one you think of first. There's so much of it. Whereas this guy is very like weird in his own way. Like, both of the twos are weird in their own way. He's weird because he's a traitor and everything, and because he does opposite things at the central versus what he does at the periphery, right? Because even though there's this relationship, central versus periphery, he also acts on both, right? And he acts on both in opposite ways, right? And the central, he's inhibiting sympathetics, which is going to encourage dilation indirectly, right? Because if you have less of all these guys, then you have less of this guy, which means you have less constriction, right? You're going to dilate. But then at the periphery, he's over there constricting and saying, oh yeah, I'm team sympathetic, I'm part of it and everything. So he's literally a hypocrite and doing two opposite things in two opposite places. That's alpha 2. That's why he's the most weird and unique one. That's why I put the boldest box around him, separating him from the others. But beta 2 is also weird in its own way, as I've explained. And one of the ways that's weird that I didn't explain is this. The two types of adrenaline, because these are all adrenaline receptors, right? So the two types of adrenaline are epi and norepi. Norepi is the kind of main character one that you think of first. And guess what? It only binds to 3 things, whereas epi is kind of like, you know, next level version of that. It binds to 4 things. Right? So I think of norepi as being like not epi, right? That's what the name means, I think. But that's how I think of it anyways. And I think it's actually like a precursor for epi or something, but you see how alpha 2... Oh, sorry, I did that wrong. This is how I normally draw it, because alpha 2 is weird and he's the traitor and he inhibits all the other guys. So I do it like that. Sometimes I'll represent it like that for a reason. But for this thing of who binds to what, that's not what should be there. What should be there is this. What am I doing? I literally just drew the exact same thing. Okay. Alpha 1. Oh my, I'm getting annoyed. Okay. I've never actually drawn this particular thing before and demonstrated it. I just like only thought about it. But I want to solidify it and draw it. Yes, this. Norepi only binds to the first 3. Norepi doesn't bind to that last guy, beta 2. Only epinephrine binds him. So you see how he's the odd man out of all those 4 when it comes to like who gets bound. Like, epi bounds to all of them, but beta 2 is left out when it comes to norepinephrine. Norepinephrine does not bind to beta 2. Versus when it comes to like actual function, the one who I think of as the weirdest odd man out is alpha 2, because he literally inhibits everybody else. That's completely unique. So I mean, you probably won't, if you're watching these, probably not getting much new facts from it. I just wanted to characterize those facts, because I really had a lot of trouble understanding what was the point, what was going on. Even with like, I'm trying to think, clonidine, an alpha 2 agonist. I was wondering, apparently it's not really given in real life for hypertension, shout out Dr. Obudu, but we have to learn it as if it is, because it's supposed to have a hypertensive effect, and it apparently only has that in some people, but we learned it that it just like does have it. And I was so like confused, because like, okay, you're giving alpha 2 agonist, you're boosting this alpha 2 receptor. Yes, you're dilating them because you're inhibiting their sympathetics centrally, but at the actual blood vessel, the receptors that are on the blood vessel are causing constriction, even though the alpha 2 receptors on the brain are indirectly causing dilation. But you have alpha 2 receptors on your blood vessel too, because you know you have all these receptors on all these types of receptors all on different parts of your body. They're spread out across your whole body. So it's like the thing is canceling itself out. So what's the point of it? But he explained that ooh, and shout out Ngozi for this. She actually represented this by actually crossing it out and using this thing, like physically drawing it and like actually crossing it on there, which I hadn't actually thought to do with this particular thing of adrenaline receptors. So if you look at alpha 2 and you say it inhibits everybody else, you can literally cross them off one at a time and tell yourself what's happening one at a time. And it's actually so awesome. Just cross this out and say, okay, it's causing dilation because it's blocking constriction. Okay, it's blocking your heart and kidney, so it's lower cardiac output and less fluid. And it's blocking that, but this is negligible because these beta 2 receptors don't really control your blood very much. It's mostly alpha 1 that does that, because these beta 2 receptors are only mostly found like at your lungs and everything. There's just not as many of them as there are alpha 1. So the more main character important guy overpowers this more side number 2 guy. So it's like, oh, if it's inhibiting both of these things, then the whole point was that even though it's inhibiting this, it's causing dilation, but it itself is causing constriction. So the effect that alpha 2 has here versus the effect that, right, central, inhibiting the other guy, versus the effect that alpha 2 has at the periphery cancel each other out. Because here, alpha 2 is causing dilation by crossing this, but here it's causing constriction by directly causing constriction. So I was like, that's useless. But the thing is, it's not just inhibiting one thing, it's inhibiting all of them, which means it's also inhibiting your cardiac output and your RAS from your kidney. So the effect of alpha 2, the way that it treats hypertension, and that's the understanding I got from Dr. Robidoux, is it's not by anything vascular. The reason it reduces hypertension is because it cancels out these guys as well, not just because of canceling out vascular. So yes, it's canceling constriction and also causing constriction, which would make it useless because it's like doing two opposite things that cancel out. But it's also decreasing your cardiac output and your RAS, and that's also going to decrease your blood pressure. So that was kind of like off topic a little bit, but that was something where becoming more intuitive with these receptors helped. And it's like that process of actually like what Ngozi did, drawing it, actually crossing them out, that was really helpful. So yeah, there it is. That's my framework for adrenaline receptors.